Korina Lopez, Director of Learning and Development at Lark Hotels. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
It is our pleasure. So I think a great starting point would be just for you to tell us a little bit about Lark Hotels and your role there.
Yeah, absolutely. So Lark Hotels is a boutique management company. We manage properties of all different sizes, ranging from about 10 keys to as large as 95. We have properties that have restaurants and bars, retail spaces, and we are primarily located in New England, but we're expanding greatly throughout the country. So we have locations in Carmel, California, New Braunfels, Texas, New Orleans, Louisiana, Florida, Asheville, North Carolina, just to name a few. So we have properties all over the place, continuing to grow in these regional hubs as well. I am the Director of Learning and Development, as you mentioned, and in my role, we really focus on how we train our new team members, how we're onboarding people, how are we sharing information, and how are we developing people internally that choose to work with us. So it's a really exciting role that I just entered this year, and so yeah, that's kind of my role.
That's very exciting. Yeah, and so you've been with the company for over 8 years now, 8 years strong. Yeah.
Yep,
So
exactly.
what were you doing initially? Like, take us back 8 years ago. What did Korina's role look like then?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started as front desk with Lark Hotels. At the time, we had about 5 properties. So I was working front desk. I was checking people in, checking them out, setting up breakfast, doing all that fun stuff. And at the time, it just it made sense to me. Working in hospitality, it was something that I really enjoyed, and I was in college at the time. And then as time continued, I worked in so many types of roles. So I became an assistant manager at one of our properties. I've been a rooms division manager, a general manager, lots of different roles on the property level. And as time went on, I kind of identified this need where it's like, you know what, I think I want to be a part of the company-wide success rather than just focusing on operations at one property. So as a result, I stepped into a role as administrative coordinator where I was able to train people and travel to properties and help open them. I was responsible for ordering for new properties as well. And then that position sort of evolved to focusing on front office management, housekeeping, how do we streamline operations as we continue to grow. And I was really fortunate, even during the pandemic, being able to continue working in hospitality, which so many people were not able to do. And I think our boutique locations really made it so people wanted to continue traveling to us. And as a result, I worked at one of our properties as a general manager, eventually shifted back to my manager of front offices role. And then I created this position that I'm currently in, the Director of Learning and Development. And I've been in this position since January, February timeframe.
Wow, that is quite the journey, but also so beautiful, because who would be better suited for like learning and development than someone who's worn all the hats and done all the roles and seen all the workflows, like it in and out. So that's an awesome role for you. So you guys joined Order.co back in June of 2022. So it's just been about a year now. So what did your purchasing process look like a year ago before you onboarded and started moving your purchasing onto Order.co?
Definitely a pretty siloed and difficult process to manage. So at the time, as I mentioned, I had been doing ordering for a lot of our new properties. So we had spreadsheets that had products that we would typically order and links and prices and vendor contact details and all of the information that you need to track. But the challenge with that is having spreadsheets that need to constantly be updated as we continued making copies for brand new properties. Managing that central hub of information could get pretty challenging, especially considering, some vendors' prices fluctuating pretty frequently. It was hard to truly capture what we were purchasing. And also, products that would be out of stock. What would be some good substitutes for that out of stock product? It was a very hands-on process that could have easily been just a person's role of just making sure that we have what we need in place for vendors. It also would be, having to give that information to managers and making sure that it is up to date. But sometimes they would have their preferred vendors that they would purchase from, depending on the property and the location. There were a lot of logistics that would be pretty challenging when it came to managing what ordering looked like. And so, we made the best with those spreadsheets and purchasing and submitting receipts and having all of these pieces of information all over the place. But definitely a very manual process to keep it up to date.
Sure sounds like it. But doing the best with the resources you had at that point in time.
Exactly.
So how were you introduced to order.co, and what made you decide like, hey, maybe this is something that we should be moving towards instead of the spreadsheets and updating and that whole manual process that you just described?
I initially looked into procurement purchasing like when I first stepped into the role in 2018, and at the time we were still growing, but we were looking into options. How could we make ordering a more streamlined process, particularly as we focused on opening so many properties, not even thinking through the fact that all of these properties need to reorder products. At the time we weren't necessarily ready in terms of structure and the size, and so we waited as time went on, and then I started thinking through ways in which we could streamline our ordering process a little bit more, particularly as I was trying to focus in on the training and development aspect of our business rather than getting caught up in the ordering process. So I was able to circle back, and order.co was a company that had come on my radar early on in the process. And so I sat through a demo and I was like, wow, this process seems really user friendly. And we really appreciated sort of the interface and what that process looked like for managers and the integration of so many different vendors. So we decided to sit through that process, and we had looked through a lot of different options just because we wanted to make sure we got it right if we were going to be onboarding so many properties. And then, the team kind of felt like it was a really good fit for where we were at.
That's great. And so what did the onboarding process look like? How was the setup? What did that whole experience look like for you?
It was important to us that we didn't just roll it out all at once, because as any company knows that has rolled out a different process or system, there are going to be some holdups in the process that you learn as time goes on. And by onboarding close to 50 properties at once, it was going to be the least ideal way for us to go about it. So for us, what really worked well is onboarding in phases. So we had sort of a small group of properties that we were able to push through the platform, onboard them, learn through the process, see what worked, what maybe wouldn't be the best fit for us, and refine that process so that by the time we had 20 plus properties on the platform, everyone was well versed, comfortable, and those things that would maybe be a challenge down the line, we were able to refine and figure out what our process was early on. So at this point, we have close to 20 properties on the platform, and we are still onboarding more in these phases. But we found that that's been a really successful way to manage that process and make sure that anyone who's utilizing it has exactly what they need.
That's awesome. And so what are you hearing from those properties as they're going through that onboarding process?
Any adoption of any type of technology there's always that hesitation where, well, we have our processes, and even though our processes may not have been as refined as we would have liked, there's that concern. And managers who have been on the platform so far have really been enjoying the process. The reasons being, they have all of their products loaded up into the platform in the catalog. There's other products that maybe other properties purchase that they wouldn't necessarily have thought to purchase through. And that really helps as well to almost do that cost comparison process for their property. There will be some products that are just specific to the hotel, but it does really kind of give them that insight into what other properties are purchasing as well. And I think that they're really enjoying also the fact that there are far less receipts, which I know our accounting team has also greatly appreciated as well. So purchasing so many products through different vendors and online platforms, you have so many receipts, so many invoices to track. And as a result of loading everything into the order platform, having the consolidated bill where they're able to code when they make the purchase. So it's already done in the moment. They don't have to think about it towards the end of the month when they have to submit their receipts and invoices. And it streams directly to our accounting team. it's less paperwork for them to have to do on a monthly basis. It's done for them and it's submitted in such a seamless way. And then, we also have an invoice AI software that we use. And so it feeds directly into that platform. So it really eliminates a lot of the legwork and the time that both managers and the accounting team have had to put in the past. So overall, people are excited about getting some time back in their day.
Very cool. So with those employees that are, at the properties, helping out with making sure everything's running smoothly, instead of having to spend time on that purchasing process, give me some specifics of like how they're able to really work more efficiently or have a greater reach with their impact.
So from my perspective, for sure, development is something that we look a lot at, and training. And so the hours that they would spend tracking down receipts and making these purchases and the process overall, that time can now be dedicated to focusing on training our employees, making sure that they have what they need and that they're happy, making sure that people are kind of seeing that continued development. So we're really able to focus on what that employee journey looks like. And then also our guests, we're really able to focus on the guest, enhancing their experience, making sure that they have what they need. We don't want to meet expectations. We want to go beyond expectations. And so we're really able to focus in on making that guest experience memorable, which is why we're in the business. It's important to us. And so the hours that can be used with administrative tasks, while it's important, if there's ways for us to cut back on time being dedicated to that and focusing it on the people, that is really our focus, is the people.
That's amazing. So glad to hear that you have more time on your hands, able to deliver that stellar experience. I can tell just even from your website, like anybody that goes to one of your properties must have like the most unbelievable time. The properties look beautiful, pristine. It's gorgeous. Your website also, I mentioned earlier, was like just such a pleasure to explore. So highly recommend anyone listening to this to go explore if you're curious from a marketing perspective of like how to make a beautiful website and how to really show the value of like your properties, like best in class. Yeah. So I guess just to wrap up, I'd love to hear what's next for Lark Hotels. What are your plans, both in terms of expansion and also for learning and development?
Yeah, lots going on. We're always growing and expanding, and it's such an exciting time to be in hospitality. People were caught up for a few years, not really doing much travel. And so as a result, people are really excited to get to the destinations that we have properties. We have several properties opening this year. I was just mentioning, we have one opening this week in Maine. We have a couple properties opening in Vermont, Asheville, North Carolina. So lots of expansion into new markets, new locations. It's a pretty exciting time when it comes to how we're focusing in on developing our portfolio. And then as far as learning and development, just making sure that the way that we're bringing people in, we're focusing on those first 7 days of how we train them, we welcome them. It's just as important for us for guests to have a wonderful experience as soon as they walk through the door, and we want our employees to feel the same exact way. So we want to make sure that we're working on the resources we have, people know what the expectations of their roles are, and just continuing to develop those team members who have a passion for hospitality. That's the goal.
That's amazing. Well, Korina, thank you so much for sharing your story, sharing about your journey with Order.co, and very excited to see where Lark Hotels goes next.
Thanks so much. It was great speaking with you.